I will be looking forward to deliver about 35, 40 minutes general thoughts on the framework of building peace and peace education from a Muslim or an Islamic perspective or an Islamic context. That will be my interest tonight, is to be able to engage with you, and hopefully we'll have some questions and the challenging thoughts that we can a little bit push the envelope. And I know you are after dinner, so that's a challenge also for me to keep you awake, also by talking about such theme. Tonight I wanted to share with you two cases, mostly the case of peace education case study that we have been working with or on or within excuse me, in Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Cameroon. Since 2008, we began our engagement with the religious leaders there and with the Muslim community in these areas, but in particular working on the Quranic school and posing the question, can Muslim Quranic school, religious school, exclusively religious school, be teaching peace, conflict resolution, nonviolence, religious diversity, and so forth. And to be very clear about the positionality of myself as a senior researcher in this, and also as a trainer with a team from Salam Institute. Salam Institute for Peace and Justice is an organization we've created in Washington, D.C. area in 2003, and it's a nonprofit, aims at providing capacity building, fellowship, some research capacity for young Muslim scholar and also non-Muslim who are interested in exploring or encouraging these type of themes in their community. We've been operating for over 20 years and working in many countries around the world. You just, if you can Google it if you're interested in the organization itself. And we have faced many challenges in this type of work, but maybe few minutes on the context. The context of the work is really came after the US withdrew from Afghanistan, and then began noticing that there is a migration of the counter-violence or violent extremism in the name of Islam was being pushed in the Lake Chad area, the Sahel region, where you have Mali, Senegal, Lake Chad, and Burkina Faso and Niger, and even northern Nigeria and Cameroon. So the US government put a call for war to war there, and we were basically one organization who was asked to help and support in the education part. Of course, they allocated a huge amount of funds for the security training and police training, police border training, and also in military equipment and intelligence and other security matters. In fact, 99% of the money allocated was in that area because, in my view, one of the mistakes that governments do in dealing with violent extremism is framing it as exclusively security problem. While we know from research now for the past 25 years, not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe, the problem is partially can be addressed through security and military and intelligence gathering, but largely it stems from lack of development, harsh policy of police treatment of the local population, there are set of grievances that exist in the country and on the ground wherever you find violent extremism in the name of religion. In fact, among many of the drivers for violent extremism in the name of religion has been, among the many research been done, those drivers that were identified mostly relate to non-religious issue. And I've done some work in northern Nigeria in exploring the question with people who were with Boko Haram, asking them, why did you join Boko Haram? 12% only said that they joined Boko Haram in North Nigeria because of their religious affiliation with a mosque or with a religious leader, while all the remaining or majority of the remaining were because of other grievances, socioeconomic grievances, political grievances, as I said, harsh treatment by the police and the military. Nevertheless, we cannot change the fact that there is already a stereotype exists that Muslim communities and their faith, Islam as a faith, has been portrayed as a source of violence and a source of exclusion and source of extremism. That's a reality that I think has driven by the Islamophobic fears among many policymakers as well as average person in both non-Muslim, European American, Latin America, but also among Muslim communities as well, unfortunately. So in our work, we try to both build the capacity of Muslim community leaders, educators, in how to better articulate and be more immune against being exploited, their faith, their religious identity being exploited. In doing that, we wanted to focus on religious education, because in Pakistan, in Nigeria, and many Muslim countries also, religious education is done through the Quranic school, where the exclusive teaching of the Quran is really the primary mode of education. And as you all know, Dr. Amir, is the PowerPoint clear? Thank you. So in order to introduce this concept of Islamic peace education into religious schools, we had a dilemma. These schools are exclusively teaching Quran, Hadith, and the seerah of the Prophet, his life, and they also teach little bit of the history of Islam. That was good, in some way, good opportunity, because these are the primary agency about the faith. This is how the faith is shaped. Unfortunately, they did not have any other means. They did not teach math. They did not teach other subjects or chemistry or languages. These were exclusively in urban and also a rural area where very harsh level of poverty and development, and the children did not have good access to public school. And they basically, there was a teacher with, who have a building or just a space, and they were teaching this. The stereotype among security and intelligence agency is that these schools are the hub of violent extremism. When we began working in Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Cameroon, and Pakistan, we found out, and they knew already why we're coming. So we had lots of resistance in the beginning, but because the composition of the team emphasized the trust and emphasized one of the main things, that we're not coming here to change what you're teaching. You are the expert on these 4 sources. We are here really in order to try and work with you on your teaching how to be more effective. Only by assuring them that we are not going to change their curriculum, that they said they have worked with it for centuries now, 600, or even some of them says about 1300 years they've been teaching Islam this way, and there was no violent extremism. So why we want to come and change it? So we asked the question, what are your needs? And they basically told us the needs that they have, and we try to work based on their needs. One of the main principles of peace building we work with is to work with the community, to work within the community, from the community, using their own language and their own vocabulary and their own framework. So we are not necessarily perceived as somebody from London or Berlin or Geneva or New York coming with no understanding of the context where they operate. That has been one of the major challenges of working with Muslim community around the world. So what we did, really continued with that path with some resistance, I must say. However, after about a year and a half, 2 years, we managed to secure the trust of the Mufti, the highest religious council in Chad. And once he trusted us, the path was open for us to go and work with them on regular basis. This is a photo of one of those schools where we were working, and it's really a typically classic school, the way it is. It's been operated. You see very limited mean with a piece of wood, the teacher write on it, and the kids sit, and this is a clean, very good class here, this example, and they basically repeat after the teacher for over 4 or 5 hours with very small break for water or some small snack if they're lucky. What we discover that adala, justice, musawa, equality, rahma, mercy, musamaha, forgiveness, amal al-khair, good deed, solidarity and service, these are Muslim values. The kids knew them, the students knew them, and the teacher were teaching them in their own local language and local dialect. And they will repeat them again and again for them. There was no shortage of knowledge on the theory part that Islam is a religion of peace for them. And in fact, the teacher got mad about us when we asked them. They got annoyed rather than mad, annoyed that we asked them, how can you prove that Islam is a religion of peace? And then they will write many of these flip charts trying to show us this is why Islam is a religion for peace, and they have memorized many things that we, the teachers, we, the trainer, did not memorize in the Quran itself. It was quite a surprise for us in the beginning. So for us, peace education internally was using values that are not strange for them. And those are all based on the principle of pluralism, diversity, or in Islam, in Islamic theology called, if one can call it actually now, ilm al-ikhtilaf, or the study of diversity. So it's not strange for them, and the rituals and the values and the stories are already there. But as I said, we did run into many problems, and we continue to deal with them until today. That the perception that Western education is superior to any form of local education. So secular Western education is perceived by the government and by many also local agencies and international agencies that this is what you need to be teaching, and you need to be marginalizing the Islamic identity and religion. And as you know, you live in Europe, and you're a European, your German system exclude religious education theologically from the formal public school. And the second is the notion that Islam as a religion and Muslim as people endorse faith based on violence and others. And they were thinking that we're coming to with that assumption. In the 57 Muslim countries, there are many surveys, there is a lack of basic infrastructure of education, not only peace education or peace building, just simple, the statistics of the UN illustrate that as well. I don't need to go further than that. So when teachers have 40 kids in a small room, or when there are no chairs with no roof above them, or they're studying in the shadow of a wall, it becomes very difficult to teach peace and nonviolence as well. Lack of capacity among the teachers. The Quranic schools were not part of the education system formal training. And even the formal training education system did not have many professional development. So we were the first organization ever to provide professional development to Quranic school teacher. And whether it is a Chad where there is civil war, or Nigeria with the war between Boko Haram and the country and the government, in any given Muslim country, there is political violence in the name of religion. So again, that's another obstacle for that. And also, the sense of citizenship is in many ways does not exist. The people are deprived of their right as citizenship. And when we come to teach peace building and peace education, the values of, these are the values we teach: nonviolence, peace, inclusivity, equality. And then the teacher will ask us, you want us to teach all of these things? I need you to give me example from the current reality. I said, how about you give example from the history of Islam? And he said, we do that, but the gap between the reality and the ideal is too big, and it's very hard for us to continue and deal with that. So we rather stick to the theology only. We found that no compelling evidence suggesting that majority of Quranic school and madrasa system constitute a national security threat. We know that for a fact by now from many research situations. This is typical class where we worked in Zender, Nigeria, 1,000 kilometers away from the capital. And you see 5 to 12, sometimes 5 to 16 years old kids, they basically sit and memorize the Quran. Again, the challenge is the memorization. The fact that they were saying the people will not, the kids cannot sit 4 or 5 hours and memorize, they lose their concentration. So our work was pedagogically, how can you work in small groups? And that was quite something new to some of them, surprisingly. How can you engage, integrate more interactive pedagogical teaching? How can you make the concept of peace and nonviolence and equality more tangible in their daily life? Can you teach them poetry? Can you teach them cultural stories to illustrate that? Once the teacher began playing with these two new tools, they were quite happy and really satisfied, and that allow us to go into more debates and push the envelope on the teacher concept of peace and nonviolence, because the teacher themselves, they said, yes, Islam says la ikraha fi din, no compulsion of religion. However, we should defend Islam in any way we can when we are threatened. So we had to deal with issues of the commitment to nonviolence in certain areas. The same topic exists everywhere, by the way. Even when I teach at American University in Washington, D.C., students are not as committed to the principle of nonviolence. Gender equality also was an issue because of tradition and culture. How do you separate the religious from the cultural? Religious practices versus cultural practices that lead to gender inequality. And it was a very, very tough subject for them as well. We also had all the time in these countries the challenge of working in the background with Boko Haram or the Izala group. The Izala is similar group to Boko Haram that also opened Quranic school and religious school, and they were accusing the schools we working with them as non-Islamic enough. not a genuine, not a pure, because they accepted to be taught and trained by outsiders in many ways. Islam is a superior faith. Many teacher will think this way, and that's not very different from Catholic when they believed for 60 or 1900 or 1960, 1965 years, no salvation but through the church or through the Church of Catholicism, in fact. And then the Pope changed that, and there was a declaration of Rome that allowed multiplicity of areas or path for savior. Muslims are still struggling with that, and our teachers were also struggling with it. But for us to introduce the discourse, the narrative of equality, of women equality, of diversity, was quite an interesting component. In order to buy into this, we had to go through, this is how they write on one board, and this class was really lucky to have a board. Again, there were some lessons that we learned, and they are applied to any peace building activities in any Muslim country if you're interested in engaging in it. We said no intervention will be imposed on the core curriculum. The core curriculum will not go and touch it in our interaction with you unless you ask us at some point. So we did not totally close it, we left it open, but we declare our intention very clear from the beginning. I hear many organizations go to different Muslim countries and says, we're here to change your curriculum. We're going to review it and then we'll change it. And that usually, in my view, an imposition, and it's a wrong approach without internal ownership of the process. We will not talk about national political dynamic. We're not here to bring a political coup or a political movement. We are apolitical, and we try to stick with that. Because in Niger, for example, they accuse us, and Chad, that we are coming to change the personal status law, because there was debate between the different Muslim groups during that time. And we are not here to theologically debate with them. We're not theologians, although we had two theologians in the team, from Al-Azhar one, and also one from the US, from Salam Institute, and we both said we're not going to debate theology. We're here to look at the ways that you're going to teach these themes. Obviously, we failed in some ways because you have to go into the reinterpretation and into the meaning, the theological meaning that they use in order to convince you that, for example, you need and you can use violence in disciplining the child. And then you go into some of these theological debate, and they will learn something from you, and you learn also something from them. That when you work in such context, the emphasis is for peace and not based on the assumption that Quranic school is an education for violence. We made it clear from the beginning. We're convinced you're not violent people. We're convinced that you don't believe in a violent religion. And we were sincere about that. There would be no public or media engagement. We're not going to bring CNN to cover our work for you to feel safe in that some ways. And also, last item important, they said, we will work with you if you bring development. Our kids don't have something to write on. Our kids don't have chairs. Our kids don't have a roof above their heads. Will you be able to provide that? And we provided through some donors, some example of this aid to them. This is US government gave without branding. We also gained access to Muslim females, women. After 3 years of trust, we managed to do that. There are lots of misperception of the Quranic school. One of them is that they are source of sectarian violence. They are incompatible with the human rights. And they are anti-development schooling. You know, the education schooling media, theories of education. And, you know, some of these accusations may be right partially in some areas, but they definitely do not generalize all on more than 90% of the schools in Pakistan and Niger, in many of the countries where we work. Nevertheless, this is where people don't have them. Some photos here as well. So as I said, we frame it differently. We framed the theme. Working with them was really different than countering violence. We came in as more positive framing from within. And we said we will use cultural stories, poetry. We'll use cultural rituals. And we will play with you in a way, play with you as a trainer, so you can play with the students for them to better understand and better comprehend what you want them to learn. It's more of a context appropriate learning centered teaching method to make them more pedagogically capable, if you're looking at educational theory to explain that as well. I'm sorry. I want to show you some more ways how we gain access, because mostly gaining access to these schools was a problem. This is something we done in October last year in Cameroon after 2 years of work in Cameroon and Chad by training teacher, and attached to it a research to see how effective those trainings were. And those are some of the teachers who were with us, traveled from Cameroon and Chad after a year and a half of a training, about 4 trainings each group took, and they filled a pre and post survey in order to see. And of course, we had to bring the USAID and the ambassador, and everybody want to take a picture. And this is the ambassador of the US of Chad supporting this as an aspect for his work. I don't know if you know, but this is Ashafa, Imam Ashafa from Nigeria, well known for his film on the pastor and the imam on peace building. We had the researcher from Washington only observing, and they only were engaged at this one single event during the 2 years. These are some of the photos we done, but this also illustrates to you how difficult the conditions of the teachers and also of the students in many of these places. Yeah, this is the photo I wanted to share with you. We spent about 8 months to get to this room to meet the military governor in this area to allow us to go in Chad, as well as in Niger after that, the equivalent person we met. It's very important to go through the different authorities and get their blessing to go there and be transparent on that. Went to the Sultan of Sokoto as well of the area. He was in charge of it in Nigeria. In order to receive his blessing to the program. But design-wise, I already mentioned to you that we know we're not coming to teach you the value. We'll explore them deeper with you, but you know them. We'll give you a new tool for teaching. Our priority is the teacher and the school needs, not you as government authority. No intervention in the core curriculum, no discussion of national politics. I mentioned those already with you. That's the first case study. I'm going to do the second case study quickly for those of you, because we followed the same rationale, but in teaching different topic. The Salam Institute in Washington, D.C., if you're interested in more information about it. I wanted also to teach reconciliation and forgiveness in the Arab region. In the 21 Arab countries, education system, we found out after a survey that there was no single class on forgiveness and reconciliation. And the question that we raised in our mind, how could you have Libya transit from violent armed in the past 10 years or so, or Egypt, or Yemen, or Iraq, or Lebanon for that matter? How could you have Tunisia as well, Sudan these days? How can you have expectation that only through military means you can stabilize the country. Why would a investment of the UN and foreign government, including German government, if you allow me to be critical, and the French government and the British, the European Union in general, put tremendous resources in security, police training, army, and military, and very little investment in the notion of reconciliation and forgiveness. When we know that governance in many of the Arab countries is not stable or secure, or it's not democratic, if you wish to use that term, due to the fact that corruption, lack of citizenship, and lack of trust in the system. And the starting point for all of this is usually the children. If the education system continue to be teaching or ignoring reconciliation, conflict resolution, peace building, then we are producing generation after generation that is not equipped with the tools of negotiation, tools of nonviolence, tools of reconciliation and forgiveness. And I don't we did not understand, I still don't understand why, despite that, we continue to believe that the next generation will fix it. When in Libya, there are 9 countries intervening in the political dynamic and military dynamic in Libya. Why would the children will have a chance in the future to fix their countries? Our passionate assumption was we need to give successful example of interpersonal. We need to give cases of reconciliation and forgiveness. We need to teach pluralism and diversity in the early education system, and also in the primary school, in the middle school, and in the high school, because students do not have any chance to study these things. We assume that only if you deal with that, we can have, you can really have a chance in transforming the generation in a transitional process. Religion and Islam came in from the beginning, because when we asked in a survey that had almost 700 teachers in 7 Arab countries, and we did about 110 interviews, we asked them, if you were to teach forgiveness, where would you go? 94% of the Muslim and the Christian that we interviewed said they will go back to their faith. And they gave us example from their faith. They gave us Quranic, biblical example about forgiveness in their, excuse me, in their culture. So,
Abu-Nimer, do you
yes.
hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah. Do you think we can come perhaps to a conclusion in 3 minutes?
Yes, I am exactly planning to finish after this slide. Thank you. I'm also getting tired. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the same thing like we did in the Quranic school, we did not find any shortage in their belief that their religion and faith have these values. And what we did, we had many workshops with them, and through their help, we basically created the first curriculum in Arabic to be teaching forgiveness and reconciliation. And we've been implementing that since 2014 until today, with hundreds of teachers have been trained and they teach this. But our problem that we could not yet mainstream this in education system. They said this should be always outside of the formal curriculum. And they should be able to, teachers cannot be receiving any credit for that, and they cannot really be formally rewarded for this. They're very interested, and we had some challenges with them, like the challenges we had in Chad and Niger and others when we taught in Quranic school. But we followed the same methodology, pedagogical interactivity, interaction, as well as using culture and religion from within to work with that. And that was the main thing that we have had to work with them. And we did not teach the Christian concept of forgiveness. We taught the Muslim concept of forgiveness that had in the heart of it for them the concept of justice in the concept of them. These are the 5 values we taught: nonviolence, respect diversity, humanizing the other, critical thinking and problem solving. And we use the Quranic language and the Islamic language to teach that. Thank you for your patience.